You're listening to the Valley Current.
Welcome into the Valley Current. You're a person that knows so much about my history at Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick. I think by the time you arrived, it was called Fenwick, Stone, Davis, and West, or maybe
that's right.
Fenwick and West. And you were kind of working there mostly under Bill Fenwick, and I haven't caught up with you in more than 35 years, I'm guessing, right?
That's right. I left there in June of 85.
Right. So
yeah.
you left there probably just before I left, I think, because I had given notice, but stayed quite a while to make a transition, and started the firm. It really started initially as just law office of Jack Russo in my garage, but then Daryl Nelson, who had left the firm far earlier, said, hey, how about sharing some space? And then that became eventually a partnership called Nelson and Russo. And from there became Nelson, Russo, and Hale, and then Russo and Hale, and now computer law. But what have you been doing over the last 35 years? It's only been 35 years since my last confession. These are my sins.
Right. I went into education. I worked for a client of Fenwick Stone's after I left there for almost a year, but then went to Stanford's teacher education program. And I taught for 16 years in the classroom, but I taught four-year university level at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, and then taught at my alma mater, actually, Palmer High School in Colorado Springs.
So you moved to Colorado?
Right, yeah. And
you physically moved to Colorado?
I moved there in 1989, February of 1989, and taught for 16 years, and then I worked the next 16 years in a variety of instructional coaching positions, and worked at the district level as an administrator in terms of literacy education. I was an English major and an English teacher. And then I worked in like curriculum development and professional development for teachers. And then I spent the last 5 years at the Colorado Department of Education and retired from there in June of 2018.
Oh, you're retired now?
I retired from formal public education. I've done some consultancy jobs, with College Board that does the advanced placement curriculum.
Okay.
So we just finished a project there doing a 9th and 10th grade curriculum development. And then I work in an alternative license program for teachers here in Colorado Springs. So people who are making a career transition to go into teaching. I've taught there probably 6 or 7 years.
So Colorado is kind of a purple state, right? It's not red and it's not blue. It's somewhere in between, right?
Right. Yeah.
People tell me that.
Right. And I live in the most red county in the state, El Paso County.
Okay. And what town is that? What town are you in?
Colorado Springs.
Oh, you're in Colorado Springs.
Right.
So I remember I was in Colorado Springs, and there actually is a spring. There actually is a hot spring in Colorado Springs.
A little west of us, but yeah.
And they do, I think, at least when I was there, they were like, yeah, we're open 7/24, 365 days a year. And if there's snow on the ground, you're going to see hot steam coming out of the springs. And
that's right.
Come to the springs and rejuvenate yourself, kind of like European spa style.
That's right.
And I don't think a lot of people know how great the skiing is in Colorado. Did you go back there because of the skiing? Because I always thought you were a Californian, but you'll tell me I got that wrong.
No, I had moved to California in September of 81 from Fort Collins, Colorado, which is north of us. I graduated from Colorado State University.
Okay.
And then actually started working for Fenwick Stone in December of 81 in the copy room. And then I went to the file room and then became a paralegal legal assistant.
Right. You did the whole really starting at the bottom of the ladder and working your way up. And being in the copy room was a really intense job because they had these immense Kodak copy machines.
All right.
I mean, they were just monster-sized machines, and
45.
and often I actually saw, this is a great story. We were doing Bill Fenwick and I were doing really what turned out to be a trademark case, but it had all these trade secret and other elements thrown into the hopper.
Yeah.
In front of a very famous Superior Court judge, Judge Brown, big chubby guy. The small world thing is I've been interviewing another lawyer for the show who's a very famous lawyer, Bob Leaf of Leaf, Cabraser, Hyman and Bernstein, the big class action firm that a lot of people know, national class action firm. And he was talking about when he was working for Melvin Belli, Judge Brown was a big figure on the San Francisco Superior Court. And Bill and I had this case in front of Judge Brown, and it was like a TRO or a preliminary injunction or accelerated hearing on something or accelerated trial. I forget, one or all of the above. And he couldn't get the copy machine to work. Why he was doing it himself, I don't know, but he was trying to get something copied, and it was early in the morning, and we were both there. And I saw him take his fist and whack it into the machine and break the glass platen of the machine, and it all went flying. The glass went flying. I think he even cut his hand.
Right.
I remember him saying, "Okay, Jack, you're going to drive to San Francisco now because I just did something really dumb, breaking the machine." I mean, we ultimately won the case, but I have to say, Bill was pretty upset with that machine that particular morning, and I'm sure it got replaced. But you probably weren't there at the point that this happened. It might have been before you joined.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I remember the feeling of frustration at times.
Right, because being in that room was a little bit like being in the data central.
Right.
Everything happened at that machine, so people were driving towards getting a typewritten, or we had something called a Videc machine, then something called Wang word processing machines.
Oh, yeah.
But they were decentralized. There was no network back then in the early 80s. We were not as advanced. There really weren't yet adoption. I started bringing personal computers into the office. Bill did as well. But there was a sneaker net where you moved disks around. But where the action happened is after you printed the document, you had to get it to the copy machine and put it on the automatic feeder and hope the feeder didn't chew it up.
Yeah.
So you can get the copies made. And sometimes the staples worked, sometimes it didn't work.
Right, yeah.
You were like the central guy in getting stuff like that to happen. And there's a flow of work and people demanding priority. I'm sure your life must have been hell.
Well, that was the biggest thing, was when people would come in and say, "Yeah, I need this in the next 20 minutes.
Right.
I'd finish it and go down to their office to deliver it, and they weren't even there, or they came in 2 days later and said, "Where's that?" But it was a good job to kind of, it was entry level, and I was an entry level English major, had just graduated. So it was a good job. And then
you got to see what writing, look, a law firm is really a knowledge machine that spews out words and now graphics and tables and figures. Back then it was just words and maybe sometimes some graphics.
Right.
But by and large, that spewing process went onto the typewritten page, which was then hand delivered to you to run through that copy machine to get 15 copies made, because that's what people did. They circulated copies. And I think we had a system, but you'll tell me I got this wrong, where certain color paper was kind of the draft version, maybe was tan or yellow. Like there was certain
I think
colors,
I do remember that.
There were like blue colors were for one thing, and the final white was, if you put it on bond paper, it was special paper. These days, it's all electronic. It's all sent by email. Maybe there's a PDF file attached, but there's none of that overhead. If you want to talk about productivity of words, we could actually be dictating what we're doing now and turn them into words automatically. And that was unheard of back then. Literally, it was really unheard of.
Well, I remember when we bought that, I was on the committee, the technology committee for the office automation acquisition, and Wang, IBM. I don't know if Apple had an office automation system.
Not yet. They were too young.
Yeah. But they were, I remember several lunches with the vendors as we went through that process. And then I went to the copy or the file room, and that was a great experience too, to read the whole history of some of the clients and to see the trajectory of the case and that sort of a thing was really kind of a phenomenal,
Well, if you have
lateral move.
If you have a curious mind, which you do, and you get a file, which you did, and you actually spend some time in the file, there's always a story to every case. So the case you worked on, I remember you working on pretty much almost like a paralegal. I think you had become a paralegal or maybe a paralegal trainee.
Yeah.
We had a major lawsuit between Cambridge and SKK in Chicago. And the way we set up this little podcast is because you sent me some old historical transcripts of hearings that occurred before federal Judge Moran, who became the actual chief judge of the federal district court in Chicago, which is the Northern District of Illinois. This case went on for like years. I mean, literally, I think it started in 81. I don't think it ended until maybe like 84, 85. And it had multiple lawsuits, multiple trials, multiple appeals. I mean, it was a litigation nightmare between two parties that really should have been collaborating with each other. And it's kind of an interesting world because you did get to know then the McLarens, back then husband and wife, Sean and Marjorie McLaren. I think Marjorie is still here in Palo Alto. Her son now is with her. She's got several sons, 2 sons and 1 daughter, I think, if I'm remembering this right. But her older son, Jonty McLaren, now works with dad, Sean McLaren. And I think both of them have remarried, but there was quite a story going on where the McLarens had started this company called Cambridge Systems Group. And I think you even sent me some of the logos that you had. I'm going to try to find them to put them on the screen because they're so interesting that you kept some stuff which you legally could do because it was public information. But you must have been interested in that case. So tell us more about sort of what you remember from that case, because we're going down memory lane here, and then I'm going to make some points about how litigation has so changed and is changing yet again in light of this COVID-19 thing.
Right. Well, I think that we went early in January of 84 or 85 to Chicago. We rented a hotel room in the Palmer House just for the documents. I shipped 102 banker's boxes of documents that were evidence and depositions and deposition summaries. And then I think after about a week there or a week and a half, the judge said, I'm going to send you both home, both parties home. We're going to come back and reconvene, and you each have 1 day to make your case. We're not going to go on for more than 3 days. And I think it must have been mid-February or end of February that we went back for that, basically a 2-day trial to reach a decision. But I think the judge had said, this has gone on too long. So the thing I remember is toting those boxes to San Francisco airport, putting them on, and then renting that hotel room. We moved everything out of that hotel room and just set it up with staples and 3-hole punches and binders. And that was my office had moved to the Palmer House in downtown Chicago.
Right. We took over a bunch of hotel rooms. It was a pretty big case. It was kind of a bet the company case at the time, because essentially Cambridge Systems Group would have been put out of business if they lost the rights to this product that was called ACF2, Access Control Facility Roman 2. They had some other products, but those products were not nearly as valuable or as important to them as that security. It was a security product, and security products are actually, even today, pretty important products. And I actually think that product is still on the market. I want to say that product has sustained itself over the period. And
that was
pretty valuable at the time. And I think it actually still is valuable.
Yeah. That was for huge, like mainframe, because I think University of Colorado was the client of Cambridge, but there were huge institutions that purchased that product for their security.
Right. And, you have to say to yourself, how does that happen? How is it that people actually end up having products like that become so valuable? And part of it is when adoption happens, and adoption happens in a big way, it becomes like glue to the organization. It's what people end up using and doing, and you can't change their mind. They just know that this is what they want to use, and they use it. And I think that might even be true today. I mean, at some point, I'll probably ask Sean to come on and talk about kind of what his experience was, because he ended up doing a lot of other things. Eventually, the business got sold. And I want to say and I have the picture, but now the picture is a little bit out of focus. But I'm going to show you what I have here, and you're going to tell me, yeah, that's the picture. It's kind of interesting the way this was done. I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. This is what you sent me, so it's kind of a interesting document for you to look at. The Cambridge Systems Group. Growth based on sound principles. You can see that on your screen right now.
Right.
And what Sean did is he took this tree, which was kind of his view of how a business grows with branches and with leaves and trunks and so on. And there was even a second page, and I'll find the second page, but this tree symbol was really something Sean liked, and I think Marjorie liked it as well. Do you remember it?
I remember it, and I did. After I left Fenwick Stone, I went and worked for Cambridge System Groups and supported their sales staff. Was my next job.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you did that. So they must have really liked you a lot.
Well, I remember he came into my office and asked in June what my next steps were, and I said, I don't have a job yet. And he said, I'd like you to come and work for me if you'd like that. And so I worked. I read the trade magazines about competitive products, and then would compile all that information from maybe 6 or 7 trade magazines and get that to the sales staff every Monday morning.
So you probably remember people like Vic Swan, who was a major sales guy there.
Yeah.
And Dick Leitches, who I think was like the CFO there, I want to say. He was CFO.
And man, I can't remember his last name, but his name was George. He was sort of Sean's right-hand man in some ways, but I can't remember his last name. But he and I worked closely together.
His first name was Dave?
No, George.
George. Okay, so I'm not remembering a George, but it'll probably come to me as you keep telling us what you did. So you ended up being like the competitive analysis guy, it sounds.
Right. And I put together probably a 2 or 3 page booklet every week from Computer World articles, and I'm not going to remember all the trade magazines, but so all the write-ups that competitors were having about their products were consolidated in one document for the sales staff. And they really appreciated that because they didn't have to go out and search out any of that information in the magazines.
Right. Well, back in those days, the magazines were all on paper.
Right.
So you get the paper version and you do a bunch of sort of cutting and pasting and putting it into a little booklet to create what might be called the beginning of a competitive analysis document or competitive analysis book.
Right.
And that book ends up being pretty valuable in figuring out the trend of what are people doing, how are they doing it, what's important, what's not important.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, I have to say that work is now almost fully automated, as there are search robots that go through and literally look at, what is this document? What happens with this document? How should it be classified? What should happen with it, and so on.
That's pretty interesting. It's interesting too. You were talking about the language of law, and then I went and worked in the marketing, basically, and the language of marketing. And I think that was both inspired by being an English major, because I had a college professor who said, if you command the language, you command the idea. And I thought she meant the English language, but it really is about the field or the discipline that you're in.
Well, there are people that say, for example, there's a language to an automobile. Like there's a steering wheel, there's a speedometer, there's a stick shift, there's a clutch, there's a brake, there's a pedal. So if you throw a 12-year-old kid who's never driven a car behind the wheel of a car, they got to understand the vocabulary and language of the system that comprises the car.
Right.
Same thing true for being a pilot of a plane. Same thing true for being a driver of a truck. Even a bicycle has its own language. You have to learn the words like pedals and brakes. So there are people that say part of just being human is adapting yourself to the vocabulary and language of anything and everything in front of you. Like even if you give an iPhone to a person, they're not going to instantly know that there's various buttons you press to deal with an iPhone. There's a new language, there's a new user interface, there's a new vocabulary. And I think you were really sharp to say, hey, I'm throwing myself into this environment and using what I've learned in college to sort of adapt to the language of marketing and the language of competitive intelligence and so on.
Right. Well, the other thing too was coming out of college and working for the law firm, you probably remember people doing summaries of depositions. So we'd get a 300-page deposition down to maybe 60 pages or 80 pages. All of that critical thinking skills and the command of language was all behind that kind of work. And it was awesome. It was a fascinating thing for me in that basically 4-year period that I worked at Fenwick Stone, of watching an English major become, sort of develop the language of law. And, I don't kid myself that I knew law, but I knew the language, and I knew the structure of legal documents, which also helped.
Well, I think that's half the battle of actually becoming a good lawyer. And we like to say to people that work for us out of college here at the firm at Computer Law Group, come here before you go to law school, and A, you'll figure out whether you want to go to law school, but B, you'll learn enough about the language of practicing law to really get good in law school, because law school throws you a lot of curveballs that once you've spent a couple of years acclimating yourself to the language of law inside of a law firm, once you get out to law school, it becomes like, I know how this works. I understand how it fits together. And most people that do it that way, they actually get a much better experience in law school.
I bet that's
because they feel like they've really understood what they're doing in law school, as opposed to just being in a total fog.
Right. Yeah. Well, it puts a reality framework around the academic part of any school, I think.
So let's talk for a minute about that Chicago case, because you were really kind of the document manager, exhibit manager in a high volume paper document case in front of Judge Moran. I want to remember his name, whether it was Bill Moran or Bob Moran, Robert. I'll figure out what his exact name was. And you managed all those boxes and did all those things. But do you remember we were trying the second case, because we had the first case, and then there was a second case that involved a question about a quota and whether a quota had been met or not. And do you remember that I ended up being the lead trial counsel in that case, because as a result of a bunch of things, including one of the senior lawyers actually collapsing at the lectern.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if you were there. I tell this story to some people and they just crack up, because I remember it as Bill looked over at me and said, "Hey man, you're in charge, you're taking over." And he asked me, "Well, what help would you like from me?" And I said, "Okay, well, can you get me a tuna sandwich on toasted whole wheat?" I had the senior partner of the firm. I was just a young lawyer, but I was very, very willing to take up the mantle, and he was willing to give it to me. And he was like, "Run with it, man. This is an opportunity of a lifetime." And it really was for me. But you were there at the time, right?
Right.
In the courtroom at the time?
Yes, I was. Then it was.
So tell me what you remember happening.
Well, I remember that the attorney, I remember him dropping like straight down because he hit his chin on the lectern going down.
Lectern. Right.
And he cut a little gash under his
well, it ended up being a big gash and a lot of blood.
Yeah.
I've been in court a lot over the last 40 years, and I've seen a lot of things, but I have to tell you, I have never seen that happen with either a lawyer or a witness or a judge. I may have actually seen someone have a stroke in the course of a trial, but I've never seen a lawyer become unconscious. I think the stress, we'll leave his name out. He was actually senior to me, and he's now become retired, and he became a partner at the firm. But in that case, the stress of that case and the stress of that particular witness, I want to remember the witness was an expert witness for SKK, and it might have been Barry Schrager's brother, who was like the older brother as expert witness for the younger brother and the younger brother's company. You got to wonder if he's still alive. But I remember at the time Judge Moran looking up and saying, yeah, I guess we'll give you a recess. Maybe we'll take the lunch recess. Why don't you guys come back by like 1? And I said, well, Your Honor, could we maybe push it a little bit, like 2? He says, no, let's compromise. Come back by 1:30. So he gave me like maybe 90 minutes to prepare the cross-examination of a pretty tough witness, but I thought I did a really good job on that cross-examination because I felt like the adrenaline was really flowing at that point.
Yeah. I'm guessing you were running on pure adrenaline.
Well, it was an opportunity of a lifetime to get thrown off of the high diving board.
Yeah.
Senior partner says, hey, man, this is your opportunity to shine. I'm not going to do this. You're going to do this.
Well, you were fully immersed in that case, though.
I was pretty immersed, but I have to tell you, I was not as immersed, although I might have appeared to be, with that witness because it really was not my witness.
Oh, right.
And we had divided up the witnesses. And I remember, I think Bill was sort of like, yeah, we're going to, have you and a couple other attorneys do this case. You guys are going to learn a lot. And I don't think he had prepared at all. I think Bill was sort of managing the flow of activities, but he really wasn't going to take kind of the lead position.
Right.
Ultimately, he was sort of pretty good at letting me sort of sink or swim. And I think I really ended up surprising him at how well I could swim off the, dive of the high board.
Yeah.
And I remember we had dinner that night, and I was trying to remember if you were at that dinner, but I remember the clients, both Marjorie and Sean McLaren, saying, man, you did a great job. Was that all scripted? Did you have that senior associate fall intentionally to create some sort of fireworks? And Marjorie said, yeah, Bill's such a showman. Bill probably set that up.
I remember that dinner. I remember that dinner, yeah.
You remember it?
Yeah. Well, and I just remember, too, when the attorney went down, I was sitting behind the attorney's table. So Bill got up and looked, and I was down on my knees next to the attorney, and I looked at Bill and said, I guess just unloosen his tie, because we had no idea what to do in this situation. I mean, it was frightening just a frightening situation.
It was frightening because we weren't sure whether he had actually just died.
Right. I mean,
I remember thinking, man, I hope he's not dead. Yeah. I mean, he is looking like he is like literally not breathing. And I think he came to the rescue. And I have to say, these are the moments in life that just stay with you forever. He ultimately did succeed as a lawyer, and I think he's actually done some really interesting pro bono work. And he's actually published a book. We're leaving his name out because it might be embarrassing to him. Right. I will actually send him this recording because we're going down memory lane. And the reason I thought, Vince, it was great that we reunited is because you were just there.
Right.
And I hope at some point I get Bill Fenwick on and maybe ask you to come back.
Sure.
And we kind of do a replay of this story and get Bill's version of what happened. You and I are on the same page, I think, with exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see what Bill thought about what happened. And then maybe we'll even get Sean and maybe even Marjorie, even though they've been divorced for a long time. I think they're still good friends and they've got kids and grandkids together.
Yeah.
So get them on and we'll do like a 5 or 6 way discussion about what happened in that case because, man, it was really intense litigation at the time. And we actually tried to keep the case in California and had lost that. And it was clearly in federal court, which was where the SKK law firm was located. So they got kind of the guy's name, I guess, was Sacknoff and something.
Right.
But Vince, just in the last couple of minutes that we have, it sounds like you're doing quite well and you've got a little consulting business. So send me your CV about what you're doing, because we see opportunities all the time.
Okay.
And there might be, we'll connect also. I see you call yourself the Big Pill.
Well,
what does that mean?
I had that for a while.
On that thought.
It was a nickname I got in college from an old song. And every now and then I put that up if it's an informal conversation.
I like that.
Yeah.
That just means you've got a critical mind and you do constructive criticism pretty well.
Right, yeah.
In your life and in your writing, right?
Sure, we'll take that.
All right.
Yes.
So I will say goodbye to you, but we will reconnect and I'll send you another invitation. I'm hoping to get Bill Fenwick on too.
That'd be great to see him and talk with him again.
Good thing. Bye-bye.
All right, talk to you later.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.